Asket's Explanations Part 3 7th February 1953 Asket, Billy and Jitschi travel back in time to 13th century France and encounter a man of that period, named Jechieli. We then went to the ship together and then pushed Jitschi forward towards the transport beam, in order to get him into the ship. Grasped by the power, he was lifted from the ground and slowly glided upward. Quite suddenly his eyes widened unnaturally, and then a shrill scream tore the stillness. Once Asket and I were likewise in the ship, I saw how Jitschi, pale with terror, sat in an armchair and, completely dumbfounded, stared at the entrance shaft. Several minutes passed until he finally calmed down again, while Asket patiently enlightened him. Once Jitschi had finally calmed down, he remembered that he still had all his baggage at his camping place. So he let himself glide out of the ship and went away again in order to get his things. It took more than an hour before he finally came back again. Along with his baggage, he also had, in his hand, a small electric energizer for a cattle fence. In reply to a question regarding the purpose of the device, he said that he always stretched a wire around his camp at night and then electrified it with the battery device. So, he is fairly safe. Asket says, to begin with, we will now jump back into the 13th century. Jitschi says, what was that again? Asket says, naturally, we have indeed not yet made the effort to explain our plans to you more closely. During the next few months we want to undertake several trips into the past and into the future in order to experience firsthand, or to observe, certain events then and there. Jitschi says, Have I gotten in here with two lunatics? What is this damned nonsense supposed to mean? Asket long-windedly explained their plans to him. Jitschi says, under no circumstances will I do that with you. That is indeed insane and additionally also impossible. Edward says, damn coward. Jitschi says, eh? Edward says, dirty, damn coward. Jitschi says, eh? No. I said I would go with you. Okay then, may God help me. Edward says, God helps those who help themselves. Jitschi says, perhaps you are right. You two talk with such conviction about all these things that I really am slowly starting to doubt the correctness of my faith. Asket says, let us leave that now. As the most important factor, I still have one matter for you, however, Jitschi, and it is this. If you come with us now and experience various events of the past which are not in agreement with the traditions with which you are acquainted, then I must oblige you to be silent about them. And you must indeed be silent about everything, also about the fact that you have ever seen us. An extraordinary amount depends on your silence, as it concerns itself with the continued existence of terrestrial humanity and the entire system of planets. Jitschi says, you indeed cannot be serious? Why should I be silent then? I can indeed sell the story to the newspapers and finally live in joy, and without worry, and far away from all the insane humans. Edward says, is that really your Christian way of thinking? Jitschi says, why should it not be? Because I must indeed live from something. And just such a story indeed contains within itself many possibilities for earning. Asket says, then you cannot stay with us, because you would only be permitted to speak about it if you knew that you must end your life in a very short time. Jitschi says, is my silence so important then? Asket says, more than only that. Perhaps the existence of terrestrial humanity depends on it and the further survival of the system of planets. Jitschi says, I could not load this burden upon myself. I will be silent about everything and as mute as a fish. That is my sacred promise. Asket says, your word is of value. Jitschi says, on my own life. Asket says, then we can start. First we will fly out to a great height, in order to, from there, effect a transmission into the past. And already the ship took off and shot ragingly fast into the sky, out of the Earth's atmosphere, ever higher up into open space, where suddenly a multitude of stars sparkled. I saw Jitschi, who had become as pale as chalk, and grasped for a vessel in his pack, into which he surrendered himself to coughing up. Obviously it was all too much for him. Already, Asket's voice could also be heard again. Asket says, we will be that far along in a moment. The transmission takes only a split second. Asket busied herself with her apparatuses, and quite suddenly I seemed, for a split second, to no longer physically exist. I suddenly seemed to have been simply extinguished, corporally. But then already Asket's voice rang out again. Asket says, we are presently in the past of the 13th century. Here, Edward, take this device and fasten it onto your belt. Edward says, what is that? Asket says, a language converter. I quickly made an effort to fasten the thing on, and observed thereby how Asket opened the exit shaft and glided out. Jitschi immediately followed her with the vessel. He was still as white as chalk and appeared to have not yet gotten the grip on himself. I myself had to apply some effort to fasten the device onto my belt, and then I let myself likewise glide out of the shaft. Emerging beneath the ship, I saw how Jitschi straightway let his vessel fall into a bush in the forest about 50 meters away, and then sat in the grass. The world was not different from the way I had known it until then. The grass was green, the fir trees as familiar as ever, and even the flowers in the grass were not foreign to me. But what struck me was the horrendous twittering of the birds. There had to have been masses of them there, completely undisturbed and quite obviously not yet impaired by poisons, and so forth, as they are in my actual present time. As I inhaled the fresh spicy air, I noticed that it was much fresher than in the year 1953. The oxygen content seemed to be much higher. Also the sky appeared quite fantastic to me. It was of such a beautiful and deep azure blue, as I had never before seen. Quite obviously air pollution did not yet rule here in this century. The sun shone clear and splendidly warm from the sky, and for kilometers around there were only woods, hills and meadows in lush green to be seen. Far and wide, no village, no town and no house was to be seen. It was really lonesome and beautiful as in paradise itself. Over in a somewhat more distant forest an entire herd of deer fed peacefully, which took no notice at all of our presence. Obviously these animals were not yet so very shy as in the year 1953. And these pheasants, everywhere one saw pheasants. Asket says, you observe very much and very precisely. Edward says, it is simply magnificent here, Asket. Asket says, that is a true word. The past is, in many concerns, better than your present. But now come. There, behind those woods, is a hunter's cabin, as you would say, or a weekend house.